Let's talk some hoops. Our weekly chat with LaTulip, Illini Inquirer basketball analyst. A 29-point win over Syracuse, Mike. It didn't feel that pretty as it was happening because of so many missed shots. But I think the biggest takeaway, I guess, a bad Syracuse team at this point. I think we can call them that with losses to Bryant, Colgate, and just not being as good as we usually think of a Jim Boeheim team. But to hold a team that has some talent to 44 points. We'll dive into Coleman Hawkins, but the defensive side of the ball has to be the most encouraging takeaway from that, right?
Yeah, yet again, it's a game where your defense kind of holds down the fort, and they've just continued to give these teams fits with switching 1 through 5. We'll get into Maryland later, but that's another team that hasn't faced a team that switched 1 through 5, and it's different because a lot of your actions are predicated on the majority of teams, which either hard hedge or play in drop coverage. So it's been jarring. You can tell for a lot of these teams, they're not used to it. They got to kind of go out off script in a way. But I'm sitting there watching that game, and a lot of times the telltale sign is shot quality. You can look at the score, and it was close there in the first half, but that's why I think I texted you whenever it was, either late first half or early second half. I said, they start making some shots, it's going to get to 20 in the blink of an eye because the quality of shot was there. And we'll talk about Coleman, obviously, but there was a lot of good in this game. And there was also some, again, there's more things that you can build on and work on and teaching points I think that staff's going to have leading into some crucial games here coming up.
So, Mike, the whole switching 1 through 5, we've had to adjust to it as people who watch Illinois basketball, whether it's fans, us in the media. Through 7 games now, like what have you seen from the upside, the downside? Because we think of Sky Clark getting matched up on a Jesse Edwards for a play or something like that. Like some teams did expose that. Hawkins, right? UCLA in the first half was able to exploit that a little bit, but we kind of saw the upside against Syracuse, right? So like when breaking down the switching in this defense, what makes the switching so effective more than being a downside of it?
Yeah, a lot of times it's not even the scheme itself, it's the players. And in particular, I look at guys like Sky. The reason why I think everybody thinks about the versatility on the wing. Hey, we got versatile wings. We can switch 1 through 5. It's like really, it's the 1 and it's the 5. Yeah, the reason why you can do it is because you're not at a complete disadvantage when Sky has a big that's rolling him into the post. 1, because Sky can hold his own down there, and 2, Sky's a really damn good rebounder.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. And then the flip side of it too is you have a big that can step out and guard smaller guards. And we've seen whether that's Gerard or some of these other smaller guards that it's uncomfortable for them. There's a lot of length, and it's hard to get around Coleman. He contests. Terrence, same thing. Matthew Mayer, RJ. There's a lot there, and I think, like I said, a lot of these teams, they gear their actions to pick on the tag man, right? To throw it to the backside, to attack long closeouts. And if you switch everything, you're not in those types of rotations. There aren't as many long closeouts. The one thing that I was worried about going into the season was young team communication. And are you busting switches? And they've been better at that early on than I would have anticipated. So you can continue to build on it, but it all comes down to personnel and scheme. If you have guys that fit that mold, and if your anchors, if your 1 and your 5 can both hold their own on the perimeter and down low, and they've kicked Sky out a couple times, and they'll do that opportunistically, but he's the reason. Him and Coleman are big reasons why. And Jaden Epps too has fought down there. Sincere's fought when he's got switched down there, but they're a big reason why you can do that. So it's better that you have the guys and not just like this scheme that you got to rely on every game. So personnel helps.
Yeah, I want to dive into that, Mike. We'll get to Coleman here in a second. He's the story of the game, right? But Jaden Epps and Sky Clark, like they played 30 minutes in this game, and I know Sky went 0 for 10. I didn't have a problem with most of his shots, right? Didn't go in, whatever. But the fact, like those guys defensively, have a lot of trust from this staff. Why is that? What are you seeing?
Well, typically it's what keeps freshmen off the floor. You usually err on the side of older guys, but they've been thrust in there by necessity, and they are both. I think Sky maybe a little bit more than Jaden, but there's a reason why when you look up at the clock and there's 13 minutes left in the first half and Sky hasn't come out. There's a reason. I mean, sometimes the freshmen are the first guys taken out at the media. You get some older guys in there. The reality is you're putting in 2 younger guys as well. So it's trial by fire. And I think if you know the game, right, if you can think the game, if you're a smart basketball player, and both of those guys are smart offensive basketball players. And if you're a smart offensive basketball player, typically you're a smart defensive player. And a lot of that just has to do with feel. Dane's the same way, right? Sincere, you can just kind of roll out there and it's like, hey man, we'll let you off the leash, go crazy. But those other guys, when you're counted on in those big moments and it's late game and it's execution and it's not only just offensive execution, defensive execution, like those guys have been just on it. They're always pointing, they're always talking, and it's allowing this team to creep closer and closer to their ceiling. Because what was always going to hold them back was going to be the acclimation process and how these freshmen, how these freshmen handled that process. So I think they've both, those 2 in particular, but even Dane and Sincere as well, and Ty, right? Ty is a guy that I feel like we just don't talk about a ton. And I thought he played really well against Syracuse. He's so active, and those guys are a big reason. We talk about Terrence, we talk about Coleman, we talk about RJ, but those guys, it's continuing to raise their floor and it's continuing to get them closer to that ceiling. So I've been really impressed.
When they scheduled this game, ESPN scheduled this in the last Big Ten ACC Challenge, like you thought, like my thought process was, oh, Coleman Hawkins, this is a great opportunity for him. Then when Illinois gets Matthew Mayer, feels like, oh, he can be a guy that kind of busts this. So we knew Coleman had the skill set to be a real problem against this 2-3 zone for Syracuse. Why was he? What did he do so effectively to have a historic performance, Mike? One of the 5 triple doubles in Illinois history.
Yeah, when you have a guy like that, I think initially you could hear it, right? You and I were there where the crowd is, oh, like turn around and shoot this floater. And if you look, a lot of times what's being given up and what looks open is typically what the other team is like, cool, Coleman Hawkins wants to shoot 9-foot floaters the entire night. We may have a chance. And he could score 26 points off of it, but if he's not getting everybody else involved, then that's a win. So there were moans and groans in the crowd, but it's funny. There was one in particular in the second half. He turned, no one was there, and he just kind of surveyed and ended up just kicking it out to the other side. RJ relocated for a 3, and great. Coleman's going to get the ball. He's going to get high usage, but it's also important getting RJ involved, right? Him seeing shots go in. Because if you go into Maryland and it's like Coleman Hawkins is the only one that has confidence, then that doesn't feel like a good thing either. So I thought in the first half, that 2-3 zone, they extend those wings, right? And initially they had guy up top and then guys on the 2 wings. And then they had Coleman or someone in the middle, and then they had a guy in the short corner. And the adjustment, at least that I saw, was, hey, we're going to have these dual players in the short corner. Not all the way in the corner, but we're going to put them in the short corner. Because if you're all the way in the corner, that wing can actually kind of play 2. Because when the ball gets swung, his job is to actually kick out towards the sideline to deter any passes that are going from wing to baseline. So if you actually go into the short corner, now you're fully behind him. And I thought it really stretched that zone. And in the second half, they just stuck with it because they can count on a guy like Coleman Hawkins to make those decisions when it's 3-on-2. You get into the middle, it's 3-on-2.
Mike, can you just specify short corner? That's like right inside the 3-point line, right?
Right inside the 3-point line. You saw Ty there. You saw Coleman there a little bit. Dane was in there in the short corner. You're sitting behind that defense, and typically it's dump offs. That's where these bigs get these dump offs. But they had the wings sitting there in the short corner as well, and it's making Syracuse have to guard the entire floor, but it's also making Syracuse have to make a decision, right? If you're Edwards, sometimes your responsibility as the middleman is to kick out to the corner if the wing has to take the ball. So now you put him in this crux where it's like, I got Coleman, he's a threat now, but if he kicks it, and they were just, I mean, Coleman was toying with them, man. Like that, the second half, there was one time in particular, he's pass fake, and I could see it from my angle. He was just smiling up top. He had him on a string, and he made all the right reads, and you could tell he had just a bounce to his step. And then even when he wasn't the guy in the middle, they put Ty there sometimes. He was just always active, right? Like he's posting up the low wing defender to occupy him. Then he's kicking back out to the top of the key, shot faking. He puts one dribble, kicks, fights, offensive rebound, tip it around. Like, he was doing everything. And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. That's what he does for this team. And you saw it come to fruition in the form of a triple-double. But he has that type of activity every night. And his imprints on the game like that every night, it just happened to show up that way. And probably a little bit more usage because of how he was utilized in the middle of that zone. But yeah, they made that adjustment in the second half, and it was on, man.
Yeah, Mike, you called it out like a week or two ago. You're sitting here saying he's so important to what they do. He's the key cog on both sides of the ball for them, and he's just so intelligent. He's just a really intelligent basketball player. Some of the fun things he does, like he has a bunch of no-look passes. I don't know if people see that live, but the touch passes are really fun. But it just shows how intelligent he is to set the defense up like that. But he's a guy who like dives into the Golden State Warriors, right? He loves watching them. And I remember talking in the offseason, which is why I asked about it after he had the triple-double, because who's a triple-double machine in the NBA? It's Draymond Green. He and Ty Rodgers love watching Draymond Green. And while Draymond's got all these antics, he's one of the most intelligent basketball players. So, and Io got all this credit for how much he knew about basketball, how much he studied it. Coleman's in the same way, man. Like, and you see it come out on the court.
Yeah, and look, the Warriors, there's a lot of good teams to watch the NBA, but the Warriors in particular, because a lot of that it's read and react, it's feel, and it's funny. I think I mentioned it on a podcast previously. I didn't realize that this was something that they talk about as a team, but the half a second decisions. It was something Steph actually said in the offseason he was at camp, and Steph said, hey, when you catch the ball, it's a half a second. I'm shooting, I'm putting it on the ground, or I'm moving it. Like, you hold it, you let the defense set. And then I think Coleman had mentioned it, or maybe Jaden mentioned it in a press conference, like, hey, we want to make those half a second decisions. I was like, that's awesome, because that's what he was doing. And some guys need it spelled out for them, right? Like, I need you to fully commit over here so that I see that this guy is open. And not only was he reading the defense, he was moving the defense. And the no-look pass he had to Jaden Epps in the corner by the bench was, I think it was 45-35 and made it 48-35. He held the wing defender low with his eyes. He knew Jaden was there. I think it was Ajak that was down there. They put Jaden in that short corner, so you can see on the clip, we'll break it down in the film, you can see on the clip, Ajak is turning around, and he looks once and sees that Jaden's right behind him in the short corner. So he assumes Jaden's still there. So when Coleman gets the ball, he turns and looks directly into the short corner. Ajak hasn't moved to the corner because he thinks that Epps is still there, and Coleman holds him with his eyes, holds him there, and then no-look pass to Jaden for the three.
It's like a quarterback.
Yeah, it's like a quarterback. It's Rodgers, it's Mahomes, it's looking him off over the middle. That's what he does, and he made so many good reads on the guy that's sinking and filling. The wing's going to fill, and then I'm going to kick out. I think it's the last clip on the film review that we'll do. But he had just a great pass, great kick out to Terrence late in the second half for three. And there's a reason why you look at these mock drafts, and some guys feel like they have to do it with production. I got to average 18 a game. The NBA wants basketball players. Yep. Coleman Hawkins is a basketball player.
It's one of my favorite things so far of the season is Coleman not forcing those things and just being the great basketball player that he is. Are you bothered at all by 39 3-point shot attempts? I mean, they were open. Most of them. Besides maybe standing like 40-footer or whatever it was.
Yeah, look, they make 11 of them. I think the funny thing with Coleman is he had 10 assists, and if these guys just shoot their averages, he probably has 18, which is crazy to think about. And no, man, I think if it's within the script and if you're not settling, this was going to be a team this team's gotten crushed, Syracuse, that is. This team's gotten crushed on the offensive glass because teams shoot threes, and those smaller guards, it's hard for them to rebound out of it. So you get 17 back on the glass because you're shooting these outside shots, and they have capable shooters, right? 11 for 39 could have easily been 17 for 39, could have easily been 18 for 39. So look,
if Sky has his normal night and goes 3 for 7, like that looks a heck of a lot better. 14 to 3, that's not a bad night.
Yeah, no, it's not. And shot quality, right? We talk about it all the time. I get it's like, hey, settling for threes. It's like, yeah, but these guys are capable shooters and they're open. Because if they're that, you wouldn't hear a peep. If they shot 18 for 39, yeah, we wouldn't hear a peep about settling for threes. It's just because they weren't going in. But that's why I texted you. If those were going to start falling, which they were because of the quality of shot, like the quality of threes they got against Syracuse were different than the quality of threes they got against Virginia. Virginia, it was slightly contested, heavily contested. Like that's a different story. Then you're settling because you don't want to move the defense. I'll show clips in the film. I mean, there were 15, 16 pass possessions against the zone, like 0405 stuff, where we've talked about before with the 18 pass possession against Northwestern that 0405 team had, where it's just pinging around and you're getting that zone moving. That was the difference to me, was in the first half, same type of looks, but they were focused so much on getting it to the middle that more than half a second decision allowed Syracuse to reset their zone. And then you felt like maybe you weren't getting the quality of shot you could get. Second half, that thing was humming. And it just became impossible for them to guard. So, no, not worried about the 39 threes. I didn't realize 40 is the record.
40 was the record, the NCAA championship game in 05. Yeah.
They could have blown that out of the water if they wanted to. Truly, like they could have easily shot 45 to 50 in that game. So, look, it's all game script. It depends on what you're trying to exploit, what you're trying to attack. And they were doing so many good things to lead to those 3-pointers that it wasn't just come down one pass chuck. So I don't have a problem with it.
Matthew Mayer has just 13 points on 4 for 12 shooting the last 2 games, but I don't think, besides the UCLA game, I don't think I've been as encouraged about him than I have the last 2 games. 17 boards, 3 assists, just 2 turnovers during those games. I thought he was part of that, really moving the ball well against Syracuse. Man, if he just gets some shots to fall, man, that's what's fun about this team, right? Like if it feels like they're not even hitting on all cylinders yet. So if Matthew Mayer starts making shots on top of RJ Melendez, who's had strung a couple really good games here together, Mike, like he's gonna make a huge difference this week when they go out to Maryland and Texas.
Yeah, it's funny how it all ties together for a guy like Matthew Mayer. Look, he said it himself today, I think, valuing the things that'll keep him on the floor. And that's rebounding and that's defending. And look, Matthew Mayer is a basketball player. He's another guy that falls under that category. He has great feel. And it's amazing when you focus on those things, the defense and the rebounding, you really free yourself up to make shots. Because when you're focused on aiming and I got to make shots, that's just how basketball works, man. Like if you take whatever you take your mind off of ends up kind of coming back full circle because you're just shooting. At that point, you're just shooting. Right? You're not aiming, you're not trying to make it. And I think that's really the psychology there for him. And part of that too is because he's doing the things that he's supposed to do, defending and rebounding, he's on the floor more. If you're on the floor more, you have more of a rhythm. When you have more of a rhythm, you can make a bigger impact on the game because he's a good enough player to do that. So I think he said it today, and I've been saying it as well, where it's the barrage is coming. He's going to have one of these games. He's going to have a 5-6 3-point night. And you obviously hope it all comes within the confines of what this team's trying to accomplish, which it likely will. But he forced a lot of shots at Baylor. I really haven't seen that much from him this year. And that's equally what's as impressive is a 5th-year guy. He talked about the NBA this morning, right? And that I've been on teams before. Like that weighs on guys. That's something you've been dreaming about. And you think that every missed shot or turnover, it's lowering your chances. He's so focused on helping this team win games. And I think that alone speaks volumes because you're going to have these freshmen that have peaks and valleys. And if you look at a guy like Matthew Mayer, who's just like, hey, I don't care, man. Let's just win. Let's focus on the right things. That's huge.
Which, to be honest, the first couple of games, I didn't know if that was the case, but the last several certainly feels like it's been that. Couple good games in a row for RJ Melendez. Is he just looking comfortable? What do you see, Mike?
Yeah, look, he's doing the tough things. And I think that's also freeing him up to make some shots. Like he's rebounding at a higher rate. He's defending better. Like he didn't defend well. He didn't rebound well in Vegas. And now he's able to do those things. And again, he's staying on the floor. This is a guy, you want to talk about doing the tough things. I think when I say that, you think about rebounding and diving on the floor. It's a mental thing too. This is a guy that got his second foul with 17 minutes left in the first half. And for a lot of guys, you can just shelf them. Like they're gonna sit there the entire first half. They're gonna spend most of the second half trying to get back in a rhythm, and then maybe they have a little bit of an impact. He came out of the gates and put his imprint all over that second half. For a guy that was not in rhythm, that had every excuse, or could have just been like I didn't play in the first half, trying to get my feet under me, or rushing to try to get to your point total, or try to get to what you think will constitute as a good game. I thought everything was, again, within the offense, was opportunistic. He got some runouts, the N1, almost dunked all over Edwards, and that's what he has to do. The tough stuff, aggression. Like he has the capability to be a confrontational driver.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's a confrontational driver, he gets to the line and he's a good free throw shooter.
Yep.
So he's doing all those things. He's stringing them together. And again, it feels like a broken record talking about all these guys. It's like, hey, if this guy can play at the level he's capable of, like what that does for raising the level of this team as a whole. And RJ's that guy to a T.
Melendez, 1 rebound in Vegas over
Yep.
2 games, 10 over the last 2 games. Of course, he's got 32 points during that time now, and that's basically in 3 halves because, as you said, we play the first half against Syracuse. Okay, Mike, we get to learn a lot more about this team. Syracuse, not very good. Lindenwood, obviously, just getting into Division I. Just like they did in Vegas, this is going to be a huge East Coast trip with number 2 Texas next Tuesday. But first, it starts off with a Maryland team that I was high on going into the offseason, at least based on everybody else's projections, just because their starting 5 is really good. Their front court's one of the best in the Big Ten, with Dante Scott. Julian Reese as a sophomore is taken off. And, of course, Akeem Hart may be one of the guys that doesn't get talked about a lot, as Derek said on our last podcast, but it's very talented starting 5, and on the road, first one in the Big Ten to start off your Big Ten season opener. This is fun, man. Like, there's a scary test, but for this team, I think it's a needed one, and it's an exciting one.
Yeah, that's a tough environment. You and I both know when they have it rolling, they pack that place. That student section feels like it goes up to the sky right there behind the second half basket for Illinois. And look, this is an older team. I think they're top 15 in the country in terms of their experience, in terms of who they trot out there. And Carey's an older guy. Young's a grad transfer. Reese is obviously a bit younger, but Scott's been around for a while. Hart's been around for a while. They've adopted a lot of what Kevin Willard did at Seton Hall, and that's changing defenses. That's playing some man. That's playing some matchup 2-3 zone, and doing some drop coverage with Reese. I'm really interested to see this matchup because it's a fascinating one. Take out the fact that, like, you and I talk about Illinois and it's of obvious interest because Illinois is playing a game. This is just, if I was just a college basketball fan, this would be interesting because here's the reality. It's going to be a tough game. And I say that, and you could argue for both sides. One, it's a tough environment for Illinois to go into and go steal a win, but also for Maryland, you haven't played a team like this.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't played a team that switches 1 through 5. St. Louis, drop coverage. Miami, hard hedge. Louisville, drop coverage. And the 2 guys that have had a ton of success for this team is Dante Scott and Akeem Hart. And Reese has been great too. And the reason why is because a lot of what they run, it's double drags, right? We're going to double drag screen. So we're going to have ball screen up top with 2 guys. So Reese is going to screen, Scott's going to screen. We're going to roll Reese, and then we're going to pop Scott. And you're going to have to make a decision. And then when you have to make a decision and you're the tag man on the weak side that has to tag Reese coming in, we're going to skip it to Akeem Hart. That's the reason why he's knocking down these threes. Or we're going to put Hart up top, or we're going to put another big up top, and we're going to put Scott in the opposite corner. And now you're going to be the tag man that's guarding Scott, and then we're going to skip it to him. Scott's going to drive a long closeout. He's shooting 43% from 3. That's where they're putting teams into a bind, is these actions that they're running, and you have to help off a Scott. You have to help off a Hart. That gets eliminated when they switch 1 through 5. So now I'm interested to see if you can eliminate what they're trying to accomplish. Another thing that they'll run, and if we had a film breakdown on it, I'd show it, but this Chicago action, they'll do it just straight up, or they'll run it out of horns, where essentially it's a ball screen into a dribble handoff. So Scott will run instead of ball screen, and Reese is coming over on a DHO, and the point guard's coming off. So it's just more movement, more action. Scott sets it, he pops, Reese, rolls to the rim, and then you're trying to create confusion. Or, you're doing it out of horns, you're just doing it straight up. And look, when you're switching 1 through 5, that doesn't matter. Right. You can still maybe get something out of it, but it's not working the way you think it will, because Reese isn't having a free roll to the rim where you're relying on the tag man. If that makes sense.
This is one of my most intriguing matchups of the season, because this team, Maryland, because of Dante Scott, and Ohio State because of EJ Liddell, those teams were the toughest matchups for Illinois during the Kofi Cockburn era, right? Because they could stretch him out. They could force some bad actions in that drop coverage like you're talking about. I'm fascinated to see how it works now that it's different. They can switch those guys. They have the personnel, Mike, to match up with them. Now it's very good personnel, and you're on the road. So it's going to be a tough matchup. But I think this is a great early look at how it holds up against a team that you might play in the second round of an NCAA tournament, right?
Yeah. And look, I talk about eliminating those actions. They may get some buckets out of them, but it's not going to be the way that they design it, which is picking on that backside, throwing to the back action, getting Dante Scott. You're on a long closeout, because Dante Scott can put on the floor. He's not just like this catch and shoot, or we're going to throw it into the long post and have him work out. Like, he can put it on the floor, and he's nimble finishing around the rim. So if you eliminate that, and you at least are playing well defensively within their actions, now it comes down to two things. And if they can win these two things, they can win this game. It's limiting them to one shot, and it's finding them in transition. That's the two things, because we saw last year at home in Champaign, that's how they made their run. That's how Dante Scott got loose, was they got it, they push it. Jameer Young is lightning quick in transition. You got to get the ball stopped. Right? I think your press can slow them down a little bit, but who cares about the press if you're not making a shot to set it up, right? You can't turn it over. I know they were great about that against Syracuse, but Syracuse doesn't turn teams over. Mm-hmm. Maryland does. Like, Maryland does at a much higher rate. So look, and then on the offensive end, continue to do what you do. They're going to be in drop coverage. So I'm looking at Sky Clark. You just went 0 for 10, man. Like, this is not the game to be like, I don't want to have another 0 for 10 game. He's going to have opportunities coming off high ball screens to be able to knock down those pull-ups or attack downhill on a guy like Reese. And same thing for Terrence, same thing for a lot of these guys. But Sky in particular, they run high ball screen stuff with Sky, late clock, step-ups. He's going to have to continue to be aggressive. And if you're not going to do the pull-up or get downhill, you need to get that big to commit. Because if you can get the big to commit, then maybe you have a throwback, maybe you have Dane on a roll. Sky's aggression, first Big Ten road game, is going to be key.
The other thing is Illinois got the huge depth advantage. Maryland does not have a very good bench. We know Illinois with Dane and Jaden in particular, but of course Sincere, who sounds healthy, and Ty. They got 4 guys they can certainly go to. We're recording this on Thursday, and Texas plays Creighton later tonight. They crush Gonzaga. Gonzaga's been an interesting team, but obviously very talented, very good team. They beat them by 19 at home, but they get Creighton at home tonight. It's a team that hasn't left the state of Texas, I don't think, yet this year. So in New York will be fun. But Mike, this Texas team under a great coach in Chris Beard certainly has the talent to be a Final Four team. They have depth up and down the roster. What a big time matchup that is going to be. But what do you think of that matchup?
It's a big time matchup. I watched that Texas Gonzaga game, and look, Gonzaga kind of played into their hands. They went 4 out, 1 in, threw it into Timmy, doubles, and they just kept going to it because it's Drew Timmy. And you're thinking, all right, he can be able to throw it out. But if you are doing exactly what they've repped all week, that's part of a game plan, right? It's part of thinking about, like, what are they going to rep all week? And how can we kind of make them feel like fish out of water? And be like, oh man, because if you're talking about trapping Timmy all week, scout team, they throw it into Timmy, you go over, you trap, you're breaking it down in smaller segments, you're going live, you're doing 5-on-5 full court, you're doing the same thing. And then Gonzaga goes and does that the entire game.
You're comfortable.
You feel confident in your game plan. So that's why a team like Illinois can give you problems, right? Is they can do a lot of things. They can run different ball screen coverages. For Gonzaga, it's Timmy and drop coverage, and Timmy's going to play, so you're going to be in drop coverage. So look, they played UTEP, they played Houston Christian, they played Northern Arizona, they played UT Rio Grande Valley. This is a big test for them tonight against Creighton. Like, this is, to me, this is a Creighton team, although they're going to have Kalkbrenner and drop, and he's going to hard hedge sometimes. Like, I want to see when this team, Creighton, like, they don't feature Kalkbrenner like that. Like, they don't just throw it into him like they're going to throw it into Timmy. So I want to see them guard different actions. Like, Creighton has more dynamic offensive players than Gonzaga does. There's no question about that. So, yeah, I think they can stroll out different lineups, Texas can, that I think will be some of the bigger lineups that Illinois is going to face all year. You got Dylan Disu, who's 6'9". You got,
Christian
Timmy.
Bishop.
Yeah. Christian Bishop. Dylan Mitchell's a lottery guy, long, 6'8". Even Sir Jabari Rice is a guy that has a ton of length, and Timmy Allen, 6 foot. I think they had a lineup. Their guards aren't big by any means with Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr. They're 6 foot and 6'2", but they roll out certain lineups where, you got, like I said, Dylan Mitchell, 6'8", Disu 6'9", Jabari Rice, or Sir Jabari Rice, 6'4". And then you have other guys that they, I guess, implement into the game that, like, this is going to be a faster pace, I think, than that Syracuse game for sure. Like, this is going to be a faster pace. Maryland is opportunistic, getting up and down, but these are two really great tests. And honestly, these are two winnable games. This isn't just, hey, David versus Goliath here. Like, Illinois should feel pretty confident with who they have and who they're strolling into these games, because it's you can tell game in and game out. It's giving some of these teams fits.
Yeah, Hunter and Carr are bucket getters.
Yeah.
They're really good. But again, this is a matchup that last year I don't know if I would have liked for Illinois. But now, like, with the switchability, the versatility, the depth, I think you feel a little bit better about. And according to the newest ESPN mock draft, you got 2 of the 3 first-round draft picks in this game. So should be a lot of fun, Mike. And I love the way Brad Underwood is scheduling, right? Like, this is fun as a fan. You get to learn a lot about your team. You get a chance to make a statement as a program, but most of all, you get to learn a lot about yourselves before you start Big Ten play, which obviously starts, but the meat of Big Ten play in January. But as a guy who played in the games, I got to ask you, because everyone's asking me, the ACC Big Ten Challenge is done. How do you feel about it, and what should replace it?
I always kind of liked it. It was weird. My freshman year, we played Georgia Tech, and then my sophomore year, they're like, "Hey, you're playing Georgia Tech again." It's like, okay. So then it was like a home and home with Georgia Tech. I believe I always
Passner back then.
No, I think it was it Heath? I don't know. I forget who was coaching Georgia Tech those years. And then I was trying to remember who we played.
Brian Gregory. Brian Gregory was the guy.
It was Brian Gregory. Wow, that was my first letter ever as a recruit. My freshman year was from Brian Gregory at Dayton, handwritten letters. Shout out Brian Gregory. I was trying to look to see in 2015. All right, it was Miami, Florida. That's who we go there, and it's like this. I don't know, that arena. Let's just say it doesn't get very loud. We had just gotten ranked. We won the main event in Vegas, beat Baylor, and we go there and just a really crappy game, to be honest. That was kind of one of the weird years too. It was kind of similar to this year where, we had some cupcakes to start, and then we go to the main event, and then we play Miami in the ACC Challenge, and then our next, 2 of our next 3 games are Villanova at the Garden, and then Oregon at the UC. So similar in the sense where you're playing some pretty high level opponents. I like the Big Ten ACC Challenge. At the top, it's one of those things where, am I tuning into Northwestern Pitt? Like, and then what I do love, my favorite thing about the Big Ten ACC Challenge, now that like all these teams are in these conferences, is like they basically cast the last place ACC team as like you're relegated down, like you can't play in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. NC State, you're playing William & Mary. on a Tuesday night. So that I think is cool the way they do that, or it's not just like, hey, like in all fairness, let's cycle through. You're out this year, you're in. It's like, hey, you get last, you're not playing in it. So I kind of like the cutthroat mentality there. What to replace it with? I mean,
the Big 12 has the Fox deal. Big 10 is a Fox deal.
That seems like the most natural, because SEC is probably gonna go ACC, right?
Yeah, they already did that. But
Okay.
it'd be fun. I think for just a couple of years, let Brad Underwood schedule what he wants, because I think that's going to get us Kansas. That's all I want, Mike. Because I want a home and home, Kansas, Illinois, get Bill Self back, Illinois,
Yeah.
go to Fog Allen so we can all visit Fog Allen, which I hear is the best atmosphere in college basketball. We got to get that done. So anyway, I can get that done. But a Big 10, Big 12 would be a lot of fun, because those two conferences have been arguably the two best for
Yeah, and you may get Baylor too, right? I'm just thinking about the relationships that
Iowa
Underwood
State.
has. Like, yeah, West
Texas.
Virginia. Maybe you get a West Virginia in there with Hugs, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of different chances. Because the one thing that I think Underwood's proven over the years is I think he looks at all these non-conference games as, hey, it's a win-win. Either we're going to learn a lot about our team, or or we're going to win the game. So that's kind of how you have to look at it, because you can tell at times through scheduling what teams want to just play the win total game to get the NCAA tournament, right? Like, I think a lot of times you look and it's like, oh man, look at that. Look at Minnesota last year, right? They schedule these games to try to get this race to get to 20 wins. Like, just get to 20 wins, the committee will look at it and they'll let us in. So if we get to 12-0 or 12-1 with no non-conference, really no challenges in the non-conference, then all we got to do, especially when it was an 18 game slate, all we got to do is go 8-10 in conference. We get to 20 wins, maybe win one in a tournament. How are you going to keep us out at 21 wins? And I think that's just a way that people have tried to like sidestep the system. And now you can tell they schedule, like, you can tell by the way someone schedules how secure they are in their program.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're scheduling the heavy hitters in non-conference, you're not worried about this whole bubble thing for the NCAA tournament. You think you got a team that can not only compete and win those games, but you have a team that's gonna do some things in March. So I always look at non-conference schedules, because you can tell. But now with the portal, I think what people don't realize, and maybe obviously sometimes you look, it's like, hey, they're playing, there's a football game in 2030. Like, they're obviously scheduled ahead. But now with the portal, it's like, hey, that team that we scheduled that we thought we were going to play, like, it is not that team anymore, good or bad. We thought we were playing a really good matchup, and now they're bottom feeders. Or we thought we were going to get like a gimme, and now they reloaded in the portal, and it's a tougher game than we expected. So I think year to year that becomes kind of fascinating as well.
Well, Michael Tulip, next week we'll be able to talk about what happened against Maryland, what happened against Texas, an eventful week ahead. Always appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, man.